power goes out tonight, not for an hour, for 10 days. The refrigerator is already warm by morning. You open it anyway. The bacon, the ground beef, the pork shoulder you pulled out of the sale bin last Saturday, all of it, on the slow road to ruin, and nothing you can do about it. Now imagine the same storm hitting my farm in Chester County, Pennsylvania. My smokehouse is standing out behind the barn. It has stood there for 80 years. There is a ham on that rafter that has been hanging since November. It is not spoiled. It is not even close to spoiling. The salt is doing some of the work. The cold earth is doing some of it. The smoke did its part in November. Not one of those methods needs a single wire from the power company. Not one of them was invented in my lifetime. My name is Moses Shirley. I am Amish. I farm in Chester County, Pennsylvania. My family has been butchering and putting up meat without a refrigerator since long before refrigerators existed. My grandfather did it. His father did it before him. The methods have not changed because they do not need to change. Today, I want to walk you through the methods we still use on this farm. Every one of them. The same methods you can use whether you live on a farm or in a townhouse. Whether you are a hunter putting up venison, or a family trying to eat well, without depending on a system that can fail you the moment the lights go out. These are not survival tricks. These are not extremist ideas. These are the normal, everyday methods that kept families fed on this continent for 200 years before the electric company arrived. And done right, they make meat that tastes better than anything you ever pulled from a freezer. That is the part the grocery store cannot tell you, because there is no money in it for them. The first method, the oldest method, salt. Salt is the grandfather of every method that follows. Every people on earth who raised animals figured this out, not because they read about it, because they watched meat left in salt survive while meat left without it died. The why is plain chemistry. Bacteria, the small creatures that spoil meat, they need water inside the meat to live. Salt is what they call thirsty. When you press salt onto the surface of a cut of meat, the salt draws the moisture outward. The meat dries from within. The bacteria starve. The meat keeps. Here is the real number. The old books are plain about it. 2.5% salt by the weight of the meat. That is the number that works. Most home cures run between 2% and 3%. For every pound of meat, that is about 450 grams, you weigh out roughly 11 grams of salt. Just under 2 teaspoons. A 5-pound pork belly needs 3 to 4 tablespoons of salt to cure it right. You can add a small amount of sugar, 0.5% to 1%. It softens the sharpness of the salt and lets the flavor come forward. You rub the salt mix evenly over every surface of the meat, every nook, every fold. No bare spots. Then you set the meat in a cool place, 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and you leave it alone. Small cuts cure in a few days. Bigger cuts take a few weeks. A whole ham can take several weeks to several months. The method is slow. That is why it works. Nothing done quickly lasts. I will be honest with you before we go a single step further. This is the most important honest word in this video. Curing meat at home is real work, with real consequences, if done wrong. There is a thing called botulism, a poisoning severe enough to kill. It has killed people through history who cured meat carelessly, and I will not have you on that list. For short cures, quick jerky, small cuts of belly, plain salt is sufficient. For anything that hangs long or smokes low for days, you need curing salt. What folks call Prague powder number 1. It is plain salt mixed with a small dose of sodium nitrite, 1 part sodium nitrite to 15 parts salt. That small dose is what stops the bacterium that causes botulism in a slow-cured or smoked meat. Use a tested recipe. Use curing salt at the right percentage, about 0.25% of the meat's weight. Follow the numbers. Do not guess. The old butchers knew this in their bones. The modern science just gave it a name. The second method is smoke. After the salt does its work, the smokehouse does the rest. Walk behind nearly any old Amish farm in Chester County, and you will find a small wooden building. Dark inside, low door, tin roof. That is the smokehouse. Year after year the hams hang there, and the bacons, and the sausages of the family. Smoke does three things at once. First, it dries the surface of the meat further. Dry meat does not spoil. Second, it deposits natural compounds on the meat that bacteria find hostile. Third, and this is the part everyone remembers, it gives meat a depth of flavor that no oven and no machine can match. There are two kinds of smoking. Cold smoking is done below about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Just smoke, very little heat. This is what makes a true country ham or a long-hung smoked sausage. Hot smoking runs between 160 and 225 degrees. That is what cooks the meat through as it smokes, the way smoked ribs and brisket are made. Cold smoking requires a proper salt cure first, because the temperature never rises high enough to kill bacteria on its own. Hot smoking cooks as it goes. Both are legitimate. Both have their place on this farm. The wood matters. Hickory for deep smokiness. That is the king of smoke woods in this part of the country. Applewood for a sweeter, milder smoke, good on pork and poultry. Oak, maple, pecan, all sound choices. Never pine. Never any soft or sappy wood. The resin will ruin the meat and can make you sick. That is not a maybe. That is a certainty. A few good chunks of hardwood. A small, slow-burning fire below. Steady smoke for hours, or days, depending on what you are smoking. That is the whole craft. And a properly salt-cured, properly smoked country ham, hung in a cool, dry place, can keep for many months, sometimes longer than a year. Not a single watt of electricity required. The third method is sugar. I say that knowing how strange it sounds. Sugar alone does not preserve meat, but sugar with salt makes a softer, sweeter cure. And that is what gives you a proper old-fashioned sugar-cured ham. The kind of breakfast meat that tastes like a sundae at my grandmother's table. The recipe is simple. 2 to 3% salt, plus 0.5% to 1% sugar, by weight of the meat. Sometimes with a small amount of molasses. Sometimes with black pepper or bay. You rub it onto the meat, the same way you would a plain salt cure. The sugar softens the harsh edge of the salt. The flavor that comes out is sweet and savory at once. Deep. Round. Nothing like the flat taste of a grocery store ham. What nobody tells you about a sugar cure is this. The sugar feeds a slow fermentation that happens inside a properly cured meat. The bad bacteria stay starved on the salt. The good fermentation does a small, quiet work over weeks that gives old-fashioned cured meat its depth. That is the why behind the wonder. Folks who taste a proper sugar-cured ham for the first time always ask the same thing. What is in this? The honest answer is salt and sugar and thyme. The fourth method is vinegar. Plain white vinegar, apple cider vinegar, makes a brine that bacteria cannot live in. The acid is too sour for them. When you take a sausage, a piece of pork, a fish, and place it in a vinegar brine with salt and spices, the vinegar does what salt does in a salt cure. It makes the meat hostile to spoilage, and it gives it that bright, sharp, pickled flavor that folks either love from the first bite or come to love over time. This is the method behind pickled herring, pickled sausage, pickled pig's feet, the kind of jar that used to sit on the counter of every country store in this county. The brine is vinegar, a small amount of salt, a small amount of sugar, and whatever spices belong with what you are pickling. Use it right, and the meat keeps in a cool place for weeks, sometimes months. One honest word on vinegar. It is less protective than a full salt cure or pressure canning. Vinegar-brined meats are best kept in a cool place and eaten within their proper time. It is wonderful for a few weeks. It is not a method for making meat shelf-stable for a year. Know what each method does and use it for that purpose. That is how the old folks never got sick from their own pantry. The fifth method is lard, and this one surprises folks the most. The French call it confit. The plain farm version of it is potted meat. You cook a piece of meat slowly. Then you submerge it entirely in melted rendered lard. fat from the same pig you butchered, and let the lard cool and harden completely around it. The hardened lard seals out all air. No air means no bacteria. No bacteria means the meat keeps in the cellar for months. When you want the meat, you scoop it from the lard, warm it gently, and eat it. The meat comes out tender, rich, unspoiled. The lard itself you save and cook with. Nothing wasted ever. Not one scrap. That is the way this farm has always worked. The sixth method is the root cellar itself. The cellar is not a curing method. It is the home of every curing method. A proper root cellar, stone-walled or dug into a hillside, holds naturally between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, winter and summer. That is the temperature of a refrigerator, kept by the earth itself with no power, no compressor, no bill from anyone. Inside the cellar hangs the cured ham. The smoked sausages rest on the shelves. The crocks of lard-sealed meat sit in the cool dark. The jars of pressure-canned beef stand in rows. The barrels of brined pork wait. The cellar gives every method I have shown you a safe, cool, dark home. The earth holds the temperature steady. The dark stops light from doing its slow harm. A good root cellar is the heart of the farm pantry. I have spoken before on this channel about how to build a proper root cellar. If you missed that, go back and find it. Every method I am showing you today works 10 times better when it has a proper, cool, dark cellar to live in. The seventh method is the simplest. It is winter itself. When the temperature outside drops below freezing and stays there, as it does for months in a Pennsylvania winter, the outdoors becomes a freezer. The old farmers butchered their hogs in November and December for a reason. The cold did half the work of preservation without a single method beyond hanging the meat in a clean, unheated outbuilding. You wrap the meat in clean cloth, burlap or muslin. Hang it where the temperature stays consistent. Check it daily. Once the cold breaks in spring, the meat needs salt, smoke, canning, or eating. But for those cold months, winter does the work for you. The whole rhythm of the farm year was built around what the weather would allow. The old folks did not fight the seasons. They worked inside them. The eighth method is drying, what most folks call jerky. You take lean meat, beef, venison, turkey, cut it into thin strips, season it with salt and spices, and dry it slowly until nearly all the water is gone. Dry meat will not spoil. Dry meat keeps for months in a jar on the pantry shelf. A pound of beef becomes a few ounces of jerky, dense and tough, that you can carry in a coat pocket and eat in the field. The honest safety word on jerky comes from the agriculture department, and it confirms what the old folks always did. The meat should reach an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit at some point in the drying process, either by a brief cook before drying or by the drying temperature itself in the first hour. After that hot moment, you finish drying at around 140 degrees until the meat is dry and leathery throughout. For wild game and for pork, freeze the meat for several weeks before you make jerky from it. That step kills any parasites that may be present. A small precaution, well worth it. The result is the lightest, longest-keeping meat there is. Months on a shelf. Longer if you vacuum seal it or keep it cool. Real food. Real protein, ready anytime you need it. The ninth method is the most modern of the old methods, pressure canning. Pressure canning is not as old as the others. It came into wide use in the early 1900s, but it has been on Amish farms since my own grandfather can remember, and it is the most reliable method for keeping cooked meat for the long haul. The method is this. You cook the meat, pack it hot into clean glass jars. Seal the jars and put them in a pressure canner, not a boiling water bath, a pressure canner, under high steam pressure for the time the recipe specifies. The high pressure raises the temperature inside the jar to 240 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to kill every bacterium, every spore, including the spores that cause botulism. The jars seal airtight as they cool. The meat keeps on a pantry shelf for 3 to 5 years, easily, without a single day of refrigeration. The safety word here is the most important in this entire video. You must use a pressure canner for meat, not a water bath canner. and you must follow tested times and pressures from a real source. The USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning, your county extension office, or the Ball Canning Book. Do not guess. Do not shortcut. Do not try it from memory. Improper pressure canning of meat is the most common source of serious home food poisoning in this country. Done right, it is one of the safest and most useful skills you can learn. Done wrong, it is dangerous. I would rather you wait and learn it properly than attempt it from a memory of someone else's instructions. A jar of pressure-canned beef sitting on your pantry shelf is a quiet thing of beauty. Open it, warm it in a pan with broth and vegetables, and you have a full, hot meal in 15 minutes. 3 years after you put it up. No power required, no thawing, no planning ahead. Just open and eat. Now I want to pause for a moment, because this is the part that matters most. Look at what we have just walked through. 9 methods, every one of them older than the refrigerator. Every one of them used in working Amish households today. Every one of them used on farmsteads across this country and across the world before the power lines went up. Salt, smoke, sugar, vinegar, lard, the root cellar, the winter cold, drying, pressure canning. Together, in different combinations for different meats, these 9 methods will keep meat from spoiling for months, sometimes for years. And here is the quiet truth about it. When you preserve meat this way, the meat does not just keep, it gets better. A ham hung 6 months in a smokehouse is a better ham than the one you put in that smokehouse. A jar of pressure-canned beef has a depth of flavor a fresh roast does not match. Sugar-cured bacon tastes like nothing on a styrofoam tray from the grocery store. The methods are not a compromise. The methods make the food. There is no money for the grocery industry in teaching folks this. There is no profit in a family that buys a side of pork once and eats well from it for an entire year. So the knowledge has quietly faded. The cured ham at the store comes wrapped in plastic and full of chemical preservatives the old butchers would not recognize. And most people today no longer know there was another way. But there was another way, and there still is. And it works as well today as it did in 1825. My grandfather butchered every fall of his life, and never once owned a refrigerator. My father did the same. I do the same. My wife runs the kitchen end of it the way her mother did, and the way her mother's mother did before that. The meat in our cellar right now would keep my family fed through a winter, with no power, no open grocery store, no help from anyone outside this farm. That is not survival living. That is normal living. The way it was done on this land for 200 years before the electric companies came. You can do the same. Not all at once. One method at a time. Start with the simple methods. Make jerky first. It is the most forgiving method and the safest one to learn on. Buy a few pounds of lean beef or venison. Cut it into thin strips with the grain. Salt and season it. Dry it in a low oven that reaches 160 degrees in the first hour. Finish at 140 until it is dry and leathery throughout. Store it in a jar in a cool place. Once you have done that, once you have eaten meat you preserved with your own 2 hands, the rest of the methods will not feel strange anymore. The salt cure will make sense. The smokehouse will call to you. The pressure canner will seem like the natural next step. Build the skill year by year, recipe by recipe, one method at a time, until the day comes that you can stand in your own pantry, no matter where that pantry is, and know that you can feed your family from your own work. No wire from anywhere. Here is what I want you to do this week. Pick one of these 9 methods. The simplest one that speaks to you. For most folks, that is jerky. Start there. Do it once. Do it right. Eat what you made. Tell me in the comments below which of the 9 methods sounds like the one you would try first. Jerky, salt cure, smoke, lard storage, pressure canning. Tell me. And if your grandmother or your grandfather kept a smokehouse, or a root cellar, or a barrel of brined pork in their cellar, tell me what you remember of it, because those memories are the very knowledge I am trying to keep alive on this channel. I read every single one. Next time, Since we have spoken of putting meat up for the long winter, I am going to show you the old way my people render lard from a side of pork. The slow heat, the cracklings, the skimming, the storage. Every step from the fat scraps to the clean white jars on the cellar shelf. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, get a good thermometer. Get a tested recipe. Start with the easy ones. The old folks did not learn this all at once. Neither will you. But one method at a time, you will build the kind of pantry the grocery store cannot give you and cannot take away. That is enough for today.